So good morning, everyone. So I'm Matt Levin. I'm the Executive Director of the Alliance. Thank you for joining us for this session on the budget. This is going to be a lot of process and a little bit of content, and then time for us to talk about what this all is. It's really hard to do this session virtually because I don't get a chance to ask questions like, so how many of you are familiar with this? Or do you have any questions about that? It's a little hard to stop along the way, but we'll do our best. And so if you have a question along the way, try either raising your hand or go doing vigorous hand motions, or hit unmute and go ahead and chime in. There are a lot of us here, but we'll try to be informal about it. I would note that we have a lot of people here with a wide range of experience with the budget. So this is going to try to cover a lot of different perspectives. And I hope everyone will find something in it that they find informative and helpful. But if we're missing something or it's not working for you, just holler and we'll try to go ahead and fill in the blanks. Let's go to the next slide, Dora. Thank you. So we're going to start with some process points because the budget is a law in the state of Vermont. It has to start in the House, but it follows the same path that some of you who have done our Advocacy 101 training have seen this chart. It follows the same path as any other bill in the Vermont legislature. It gets introduced, in this case, by a committee. It's a little different because it's a committee bill as opposed to a more traditional bill. But basically, it gets introduced by the committee, and then it sits in that committee. And this committee for the budget is the Appropriations Committee, and they then work on it. They pass it out of committee. It goes to the floor. It gets read a second time and a third time. So there are two votes. There are debates in between. Then it goes to the Senate. The Senate does their work on it, and the whole process starts over again. They can change it, they can amend it, they can do whatever they want. And then the House and the Senate come together in a conference committee, work out a compromise version, and then send it to the governor. The governor can either veto it, allow it to go without his signature, or sign it. So that's really quick, but that's the basic path. One of the key additions for the budget that is not on this chart that you've heard us talk about a lot, or you've read our comments about it, is that as part of the budget making process, the Appropriations Committee does two things to collect input. One is they have a public hearing, which is just where people get to talk at the committee. It's not back and forth, it's one direction. Many of you have spoken at that, and that actually matters a lot. They listen to those comments and they are informed by them. The other thing that informs their thinking is letters from the policy committees. So each of the committees in the House gets a chance to write a letter to House Appropriations that says, hey, the stuff you're doing on transportation, we think you should do this, this, or this, or the governor has recommended this. We think you should do this, this, or this. And that reminds me, I've neglected one very important step in the process. Forgive me. So I'm trying to go fast, so forgive me for skipping over that. The budget process actually begins with the governor's recommended budget. The governor does, and actually, Dora, let's go to the next slide because that really starts to lay this out. Thank you. So the budget process starts here. It's listed on this chart. I'm not going to read all these steps. The point is that the budgeting process actually starts in the summer, and the high point for it is that mid-January line where the governor releases their recommended budget for the next fiscal year. And that is in the way that the legislature currently does their work. The legislature is very reliant on the governor's outline to do their work. They start with what the governor proposes and make changes from there. Our legislature does not have enough staff or capacity to do their own budget. They have to use the governor's budget because the governor has such a large staff, more people involved, et cetera, et cetera. So they use the governor's budget as a starting point, and then they work from there. Let's go to the next slide so we can move through this quickly. So in January and February, the House Appropriations works on their version of the budget, starting again with the governor's recommend. The Senate Appropriations Committee begins their process. By the end of March, the House passes their version. The Senate passes their version by the end of April. And then in May, there's the conference committee that pulls all the pieces together. And this is all about the fiscal year, the state fiscal year, which starts on July 1st. So right now we're working on the FY23 budget, which starts July. Let me pause there and see if there are any questions. That's great. Hold that. Yeah, stop right there, Dora. Hold that slide. if anyone has any questions on process, again, this is really compressed. I apologize for that, but we want to get through as much as we can in our limited time today. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, not seeing any hands, not seeing anything in the chat. Okay, let's go on to the next slide then. So that's an outline of the process. So where are we in the context of this year? So again, we start with the governor's recommend. Relatively few surprises, not a whole lot of big proposals, large focus on one time. There weren't a lot of big changes being proposed. One big change that was proposed was a caseload reduction that was proposed for reach up. And the House is on the way, we think, towards rejecting that proposal. But those of you who go to the reach up session can hear more about that. But our hope is that they will reject that proposal. That was $4.7 million. So it was a big, big chunk. And the other big thing that is uncertain is the tax cut credit proposal package, which I'll speak about in a moment. But so that's the context for the governor's recommend. Not a lot of big changes in big moving pieces. Let's go to the next slide, please. One thing that's important to note is that the process for the calendar year 22, it's a more sort of normal, simpler process. We're back to normal dates and normal calendar. There's not going to be a supplemental budget bill. The regular bills are bigger than usual because they're trying to still handle all the federal money that needs to be allocated. And there's a possibility that the Joint Fiscal Committee, which I'll speak about in a moment, may be involved in post-session work. But we're basically back to a normal schedule, which is a relief because it's just much less hectic and a little bit easier to try to understand what's happening. A little bit easier to keep track of the bouncing balls. And it also means that when you talk to legislators, you don't have to qualify it and saying this bill or that bill. It's all pretty straightforward. You can just talk to legislators in a straightforward way about what's in the budget and make a regular ask. And you don't need to try to talk about special circumstances or twists and turns, which is a relief for us as advocates. Okay, still not seeing hands, so let's go to the next slide. So what are the complicating factors? The first one on this list we can take off the list, which is good. There was a thought that the governor might veto the Budget Adjustment Act. I skimmed over that in the summary of the process. In the middle of every fiscal year, which is December, January, the legislature takes up a bill to make adjustments to the budget because we're halfway through the budget year and there's always changes that need to be made. I skimmed over that. We're going to continue to skim over it. But one of the things that could have complicated the process is if the governor vetoed that bill, which he indicated at his press conference yesterday that he was not going to. There's still a great deal of federal pandemic relief funds floating around, and it's not clear how those are going to be spent. We'll talk about the tax cut proposals in a moment. Still not really clear what the end of the pandemic looks like. Build Back Better, you heard Polly talk about that. That's a possibility. The federal budget did seem to pass without complication, although big complication in the food and nutrition world, the end of the federal support for universal school meals. That's a big complication. That's a big complication. But in terms of the process, it seems like that's going to go smoothly. There's also these questions about one-time money and revenue surplus and what's going to happen with that. That was the underlying issue with the possibility that the governor might veto the Budget Adjustment Act. There's still a lot of disagreement between the legislature and the administration about how to spend this money and what to do about it. You might have seen the governor made comments at his press conference yesterday about what to do about the surplus in the property taxes and whether to allocate that for programs or refunds to taxpayers or some other things. So there's some very large pieces of the puzzle, big chunks of money with big philosophical disagreements and process disagreements between the legislature and the administration that need to be resolved. Most of them have nothing to do with the little bits and pieces that we're focused on, but that's the context for a lot of these discussions. And again, there's the last point here is there is this notion that in the out years, the revenue, it will turn down and will mean tightening of belts, or we would hope a consideration of a change in tax policy to increase revenue. But regardless, that isn't very much in legislators' minds when you talk to them about what the future is, because they don't want us to put permanent programs in place that they won't be able to support in 2 or 3 or 4 years. You hear that a lot. We hear that a lot. All of us hear that when we do our advocacy. Legislators saying they don't want to start a new program because they don't know how to pay for it in 3 or 5 years. So that's very much in their minds. Okay, let me pause, see if anyone has any questions at this point. Please ask questions. Please, speak out if you have any comments or concerns, or if this sounds strange or problematic or confusing. Please let us know. I have a feeling that once someone asks a question, other people are going to ask more questions. So someone needs to break the ice. All right, we'll keep going. Eventually someone will ask a question. I know you all, very inquisitive people out there. So let's go to the next slide, Dora. Thank you. So one of the complicating factors here is what's going to happen with the tax credit relief proposals. And if you want to, spoiler alert, go to the bottom of this slide. The House passed their child tax credit proposal, which is about $48 million. And that's $1,200 per child for most families with children 6 or under. So the House has passed that already in advance of the budget discussion. They already passed it. And they basically say they're locked in. That's it. They're done. They don't want to talk about the governor's proposals. Even they're saying that $48 million complicates our request for other spending on other issues related to children. It's a problem. They're conflating nutrition or housing or healthcare with the child tax credit and saying, nope, that's your child money. And we're pushing back on that very vigorously. We need you all to do that as well. We appreciate the tax credit. It's a good idea. That's a great idea. Some of the governor's ideas are pretty good ideas too, quite frankly. And most important, all of these ideas were floated without asking us. This is a little unusual. It's partly because of the virtual world. I think it's safe to say that really most of the organizations in our coalition, we really didn't get a heads up about these things very much in advance, if at all. And they didn't really ask for our opinion very much when they just kind of went ahead with them. So we're in an awkward position because a lot of these things on their face, we would say, well, yeah, that's a good idea. And the earned income tax credit is accepted as one of the best anti-poverty initiatives we've got. So why wouldn't we want to increase the EITC? But when you put it in the context of all these other proposals and they say, well, which would you prefer, A or B? You all know we hate it when we get asked that question because we're a coalition. We're about wrapping children around with benefits and supporting families in a holistic way, an integrated, complex, comprehensive system of care. This is not about choices in different strategies. We want to approach all of them if we can. So this is a complication for us as a coalition. It's also a complication in the legislature. And honestly, I have no idea where this is going to go. The Senate has indicated that they want to, I see your question, Linda. I'll get to that in a moment. The Senate has indicated more openness to the governor's ideas. We'll see what happens. So you have to look at these words really carefully about the labels for these things. There's a question about what's the difference between the child and dependent care credit and the child tax credit. So the child care and dependent care credit. So I joked in a session on Tuesday. So my wife's in charge of doing the taxes in our household. And she's the one who knows that when we send the kids to day camp, we can take that as part of the dependent care expenses. But when we send them to overnight camp, you can't, because that's the federal rule. I don't know. So the child and dependent care credit gives you a tax credit for expenses related to taking care of children. The child tax credit says you have a kid who's under a certain age and your income is such and such, here's money. Here you go. And these child tax credits are all refundable. That's the fancy word for it doesn't matter how much money you make, you get the money anyway. So that's what happened with the federal tax credit, right? Many of us, we started getting these checks. They direct deposited them. They just give you money. And then they work it out when you file your taxes later. Those of you who are doing your taxes right now know we're getting these letters from the IRS that, blah, 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 blah. So it's not totally simple, but the idea with the child tax credit is it gets money in people's pockets right away. And ideally, the federal one was monthly, which is very good for families for budgeting and for providing care and services. The one the state's proposing cannot be monthly because that's too complex for us to actually manage. That's just not possible for our state tax department to do it monthly. We tried, but that was not possible. Okay, other questions about these tax credit relief?
How do you suggest, Matt, pushing back on the idea that the child tax credit, that's it, that's your child money?
Yeah. I probably wouldn't push too hard directly, but rather say that I think what I do, and I'm pausing in because this is a really hard thing, and it requires, this is one reason why we ask you all to come to sessions like this and to be thoughtful in your advocacy, because my reaction, my response is to actually have it be on a case-by-case basis, is to try to engage the legislator and to have them understand, frankly, between friends, the idiocy of that construct, right? That is, there's no logic to it. It's not based in any sort of reason or policy. It's a completely artificial numbers game. And I would gently push back and say, there's really no reason for that limitation. Can I tell you about this thing that I'm suggesting you all consider, and just listen to it on its merits, on its own? Don't just listen, see if you can listen to what I'm suggesting and see what you think about that. And each conversation will be different and each legislator will be different. And I guess at some point, and if the legislator says, well, this is the box that we've been given, we can't do anything else, I think you can say to the legislator, well, then honestly, we're suggesting that you break that box and be respectful about it and acknowledge. You can't ignore the fact that you're asking them to go outside of an artificial numerical box that they've been given. Don't ignore that, acknowledge it, but be respectful about it and open about it and honest about it. I think legislators really appreciate when we as advocates push against things, as long as we do it in a way that is overt, open and acknowledging it, and not too pushy or needy, but also forthright, direct, and based on the experiences that have led us to think that whatever we're asking for is a good idea. As usual, it's not a straight line answer. It's a little tricky. But you all are great at this. Our community is very well respected for all of our voices. Be confident. Our team is a good, strong, capable team, and your voice is added to other people's voices, and you should feel that confidence and speak firmly and confidently about what you're asking about and what you're asking for. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So I just want to briefly, we're almost done with the slides, so we'll just run over them briefly, and then we'll see what questions there are more. So there are 3 budgeting committees right now, because I mentioned the Joint Fiscal Committee. Just want to give you a little bit of the background for that. So this is the cast of characters in the House and the Senate for the appropriations committees. I want to repeat something I glossed over very quickly earlier, that each of the policy committees write letters to the Appropriations Committee about the issues of concern for us. So for instance, the Commerce Committee, well, the Commerce Committee is working on workforce issues, but if you were talking to a legislator on the Commerce Committee, you can know that they have a direct line communication with the Appropriations Committee about what's happening regarding workforce development. If you're concerned about housing issues, you can know that the House General Housing and Military Affairs Committee has written a letter to the Appropriations Committee asking for money for certain programs in the housing world, and that they are paying attention to what the House Appropriations Committee does in response to their letter. So even if you're talking to someone who's not on the committee on the Appropriations Committee, the policy committees go ahead and they have their line of communications appropriations. And so these are the folks who have direct sort of hands on the gear, on the machine in terms of how the budget is written. Let's go to the next slide. There is also this Joint Fiscal Committee that is an extra special committee that's made up of very senior legislators, chairs and vice chairs and others, and they are in charge of budget activities that happen when when the legislature's not in session. So there's some chance that these folks will get pulled into discussions if all these conversations go into June, July, and August. So this is more sort of for your information. If you're following this closely and you read one of our updates and we say the Joint Fiscal Committee is blah, 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 that's a sense of who these folks are. You can see the chair is the chair of House Appropriations, the vice chair is the chair of Senate Appropriations, and the chair of House Ways and Means and the chair of Senate Finance. The big money committees are all on this committee. So when you're looking at our updates for what's happening off session, these are the folks who are involved in that. So let's go. I think the last slide is just who we are and how to stay in touch with us. If you want to just go to the last slide, Dora. So that's our contact information. I think you all know who we are. We're happy to help. And I think what we should do is take the slide down and go back to the full view and see if folks have any questions or comments that people have that we can answer. So we've got time. The floor is yours. Does any of this surprise you? Does any of this seem surprisingly complicated? Or any issues that you have questions about, strategic questions?
Matt, I'll ask a question.
Great, go.
So yesterday at the Let's Grow Kids policy team meeting in the morning, Sarah was saying that she was worried that the governor would veto the Budget Readjustment Act, which includes money for bonuses for early childhood educators, right? And so now you're saying that he announced yesterday that he likely would not. So I just wondered if you could talk about those bonuses a little bit.
Yeah.
And this is exciting news that those might be coming our way soon, right?
Yes. We always hesitate to predict the future too firmly, but yes, the governor was asked directly yesterday at his press conference about the Budget Adjustment Act. And he said that while he still had concerns, they did not rise to the level where he would veto the bill. He never said the word veto. It was in his usual sort of code language, but he wouldn't have said that unless he meant it. So never say never until it's actually signed. But yes, it seems very likely that the one-time bonuses for a number of professions, folks who are working in early childhood for a number of reasons might pick these up, because there's bonuses in the healthcare world through DAs and through the childcare system. So, and it's not just people who are directly teaching, it's for people who work for a childcare providing institution. So bus drivers and janitors and other folks are included. I don't think Head Start's included. But Betsy, do you know, I see Betsy, you're there. Do you know if Head Start's in that?
I think we're included because we do childcare just like everybody else does.
Right.
So I don't know for programs that don't do direct childcare, but I know for those that do childcare and year-round services, I'm pretty sure we're included in that.
Right. I always hesitate about, I know that Head Start has some special ways that it interacts with these systems. So I always hesitate because I don't want to say something that isn't true. Yep. The important thing though, I think, Allison, to get to the bigger picture is that this goes to that big question, what some of the big questions that I was pointing to as the hang up for how everything is going to come together. There's hesitation in the legislature about giving away money to people. There's this sense that people are doing fine and the pandemic is over. I think that the increase in gas prices, ironically, or some word, will maybe dent that sensibility. I know anecdotally, I reported this in our meeting on yesterday, anecdotally in Washington County where I live, I know that the food shelves in the local food system is already seeing an increase in customers in demand because of inflationary pressures on food and inflation and gas prices, that there are more people coming to the food shelf. So I'm hopeful that, as terrible as that is, that will impact legislators' perspective. But there are these big questions about how much money is enough, who should get it, and how we should spend the money that are really kind of complicating the conversation. So there's this hesitation on the part of legislators and saying, yes, let's give away the money. They're not in a let's give away the money mode. And so the future for Let's Grow Kids is leading the charge in a coalition effort. A lot of us are part of it, of pushing for emergency response to some of these problems. And Main Street Alliance is leading the press for a package that would do wage replacement for workers who could not go to work because of COVID-related issues. So there's still some pressures to try to get some of these direct payments to workers. But the legislature is being very hesitant. And honestly, I can't say what the future is for them. We need to keep pushing for them. We need to keep stating the case. But it's a very murky kind of situation to move into. So, Lori, I saw you were coming off of mute. If you have a question.
Good morning, Matt. Yeah, I actually have a few questions. I guess the first one.
Okay, if you could turn your volume up or speak a little louder, that would be great.
Can you hear me now?
It's a little better.
Okay, I'll try to speak up. That's usually not the problem. I'm usually too loud.
I know.
So, good morning, Matt. Thanks so much for all this. In response to what we were just last discussing, what is the hesitancy? Can you speak to that specifically? Can you help us understand the hesitancy so we can help them understand the importance?
This is me trying to gather my thoughts and be diplomatic.
Fair.
The folks who have been doing the food nutrition and food insecurity related stuff have in some ways felt this most directly. There have been some comments in House Appropriations about the idea of providing more funding to the food bank. The response from House Appropriations members was frankly insulting, offensive, problematic. It was bad. And it's related to my comment about the child tax credit. Well, that's your money piece. I think that this is now going to be very philosophical, Lori. Among friends, right? I think that legislators feel like they've pushed up to the point where they're right up to sort of the Scandinavian socialist state concept. And I say that seriously, right? That there's this weird sense that if they give away too much, that they're going to create a sense of entitlement or demand that they aren't able to meet. And it's like a different concept of how we work as a government. That they've gone as far as they can go, and if they go any farther, they'll fall off some abyss. And people will keep demanding what they can't give because revenue is going to end, revenue is going to go down in the future. And I don't know. I think there's also, and Carrie from the food bank is here, maybe she has a couple comments. There's also, I would honestly say, they're so hectic, as they always are, they just don't have the facts. They literally, we give them the facts, we tell them the facts, we explain it to them, we give them handouts, we send them email, we try to explain the fact that the food bank is running hot, is so hot, way over anything that's ever been done there before, and that this is basic administrative work that, and they have trouble absorbing it. It's frustrating. Yes, Brenda's saying perhaps they think they've gone as far as they can go on what's socially acceptable. I think that's right. I think there's some aspect of this that they're just having trouble getting past it. That's a really big philosophical thing. I don't have a good sense of how to answer that. So Carrie, if you have anything to add on the food bank front, I'd be glad for your input.
Yeah, I can weigh in a little, and it may relate to all of us. And one of the questions that we've gotten several times, Lori, is haven't we already thrown money at this? Like, how is this still happening, right? And I think part of it is just the the context of having spent the past few years with the legislature working really hard to put money towards programs and issues that were really necessary to address the pandemic. And many of them feeling like their personal experience is that they're through some of the harder parts of the pandemic and not really understanding why this is still going on, like literally not understanding why there are still these struggles happening, because they thought the funding that they put towards them previously would have solved it. And so I think what Matt is saying about how they're not really recognizing that the pandemic is still such a huge problem for so many people in our communities and causing so many disruptions is one thing that we've tried to really focus on in our conversations with them. Like, the pandemic is truly causing interruptions for childcare, work, school, you know, so many normal functions. And then on top of that, we're seeing this inflationary pressure that's creating this whole other storm of challenges for families. And it doesn't mean that what they did before didn't help. It means that what they did before helped keep it from getting worse.
Right.
And that we need them to continue that commitment so that things don't fall off a cliff, right? And that's kind of the message we've been trying to deliver, is like, the good news is what you did worked. The other good news is we need you to keep doing it, right?
Right.
And so I think it's fatigue.
Legislators don't like it when you say to them, you help things not be terrible. You know, just think about how much worse it would have been if you didn't do anything. That formula doesn't seem to work very well with them.
No.
And I gotta say that the symbolism is not going to help us, right? I just remarked to Dan this morning coming back from the State House, that place is so ready to rip masks off. There's just this sense that everyone is just ready. And I read something this morning in the New York Times online that talks about the efficacy of masking and social distancing, and that the science sort of indicates that maybe it actually doesn't really help very much. So we're going to have some symbolic moments here where everything's going to go back to normal. And that's going to make it really hard for us to say, okay, so normal is that the mental health system is failing. Normal is that CIS is drastically underfunded. Normal is that there are way too many people who are unhoused. There are way too many people who are hungry. I mean, all those things that we talk about all the time, that's normal, right? But it's also worse than normal. So I think we're going to have to push through that. The good news is that this is coming not at the end of the legislative session, but at least in the middle of it, so that we'll have an ability to sort of absorb the week or two of everyone saying everything's normal, and then we'll be able to hit them hard in April and say, no, it's not. But we have to persevere. We have to persevere. We have to keep talking about our issues. We have to keep talking, spreading the word and sharing the news that we have, and talking about facts as much as we can. It's very frustrating. I will tell you, yesterday I had an extremely frustrating day in the State House. We all have them. Morgan, who just popped up on my screen, Morgan Nichols, has had more than her share of frustrating days in the State House. And yet, am I allowed to say that? And yes, she perseveres. Am I allowed to say that? Can I appropriate that phrase?
Yeah, she can persist all day long.
Persist.
I also just want to say that, I really appreciate, Matt, what you said about the fact that, our normal is a state of struggle. And when you look at, I think we were all ready to go into the State House in January, especially, and then Omicron hit. And the intersectional connection points of the daily struggle of Omicron for parents especially, and how that meets our childcare providers, how that meets our small businesses and our workers and our employers, that is setting up a system for financial insecurity. And what are the ripple effects upon our entire system? Housing security, food security, all of the pieces. So we just need to keep beating that drum to say we need to be creating a stronger infrastructure as a whole that sets up financial security for Vermonters as a whole. So,
and that's right. And to keep to the theme of this session, what I would encourage everyone to do, you signed up for the budget session, so that must be on your mind. I want you to think about putting that word into your wrap, right? I want you to think about using the word budget and state budgeting process and appropriations committee put that in there. We need to help legislators understand that this is a policy decision they're making. It isn't just us asking for stuff. And when you make it more concrete and say, this is about writing the state's budget, which we need you to participate in. We need you, even if you're not in the appropriations committee, we need you to speak out about how the budget is written. Not just say nice things about our program or about our issue, about our proposal, but about the budget. We are savvy advocates. We know that this isn't just about, saying nice things and releasing them into the air. It's about the budget. And we can ground it in that, which is to our advantage, because that lets them know that we're paying attention, we're watching, and it also makes it be much more real. It forces the conversations we have to be much more real. So, I mean, and your comments about affordability, I think, that's definitely the case, but talk about how the budget impacts affordability for people. So Brenda, I'm just looking at your point. Is there something more that we can do to support their bold and creative thinking about some permanent funding? Right. So the question about permanent funding gets to the question that the Alliance is working on behind the scenes in the very, very long term, very challenging. That's about increasing revenue. That's about trying to make the legislature realize that they can get out of this box that they're stuck in, this revenue box, this austerity box. Austerity is a fancy word, but it's so powerful, about feeling like they don't have enough money to spend, right? Austerity, not enough money to spend. There's money out there. We need to change our tax policy to, frankly, get more money into the state coffers so that we can do these programs to support all of our community, the middle class and those who have more and those who have less, support our downtown, support our environment, support our roads and our bridges, our libraries, our schools, all these things to create a strong community, strong environment, strong economy, et cetera, et cetera. So that, in terms of permanent funding and permanent program development, that's a really challenging question, Brenda, but we need to keep pushing on that. We need to keep pushing on that. Yes, Ruth, I see you raising your hand.
Yes, so I have a question. If people in the State House are kind of like over COVID right now, and that's kind of what we're hearing, is people are ready to move on. But we all know that we're still dealing with the lasting impacts, and we're still kind of in the midst of it. Is there a way to refocus them on what the newer, more current challenges might be in their mind, leading to, like you referenced, gas prices going up and things like that? How do we get stories to them that they can understand that in a week, just in my center where I have just barely enough teachers to handle things, and I have to sub every time somebody has to be out, how do we get them to understand that in the space of from last week to this week, I had 2 teachers who live 45 minutes away from our center say to me, I'm not sure that I can keep doing this with gas prices where they are.
Right.
How do we link it to what's currently on people's minds to say, this is going to affect our workforce crisis in a big way?
Right. So this is about sort of messaging and word choice and storytelling. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of ways to do this, but one of the ways that comes to mind for me is to reduce what you just said down to a soundbite that's very effective. So for instance, one that I was thinking of before you gave the details of your story was that I was in a meeting yesterday where I heard from 2 providers, 2 large regional providers, that they were considering shutting down their infant care program, entire childcare program, childcare providers, that they were considering shutting down their infant program entirely because they couldn't make it work. For your story, I would say, I heard from 2 teachers that I rely on to make my center run, who said that because gas prices are so high, they might not be able to come in anymore and do the work. Yeah. So for folks who work in the food insecurity world, we use the numbers that came from UVM, that before the pandemic, it was 1 in 10, now it's 1 in 4. That's 25% of Vermonters are food insecure. That's not normal, right? And so I think, Ruth, you could say, it's not normal for me to hear from teachers who say gas prices are so high that they're thinking of quitting their job.
Yeah.
right? So you want to try to say the critical piece, but boil it down to one sentence that is kind of punchy. And that's usually a little punchier than most people like to talk, right? I'm used to it because it's what I do for a living. That's, you know, what my family deals with when I go home. It's funny, when I go home, I talk these long winding sentences. My family's like, what are you trying to say? When I'm in the State House, I talk in this, you know, like really abrupt, you know, staccato way of talking. So you want to find ways of telling your story in a way that's kind of punchy, that gets to the point and delivers the punchline quickly. So gas prices, my employees, they think they can't stay on the job. That's not normal.
Right. So for me, it would be, okay, in a week, in the space of a week, I'm in danger of losing a third of my workers. Because really 2 out of them, that's a third. That's a huge impact. So boiling it down to that one thing, that's very helpful for me to kind of know what would make them think, wow, that's a big percentage.
And I think you could also, if you have time, you could put another dot to connect and say, think about how tight what's the right way of saying it? I'm thinking out loud, so I'm not going to say it right. But those of us who have higher salaries, we just groan and shrug our shoulders and say, well, whatever. Think about what it means. You know, if you're on a modest salary, this has a really big impact. Childcare, people who are working at childcare programs, most of them don't make very much money, to the point where, like, that's the problem. If they made more money, if they had a more comfortable salary, then they'd be able to absorb these price increases.
Yes.
Not that they're great, but they'd be able to absorb them, right? Think about it.
Yep. That is very much the case, and trying to put that in like some bullet points that make people understand this is a huge impact. My other part of it would be, if I had to reduce my program based on those changes, how many families or how many children would no longer have slots, because that's the reality. So I think trying to make it so that people can really understand it. They don't really want to hear we're still struggling with COVID. How do we link it to, okay, what's going on today?
Right. And I think this is common throughout all the service delivery areas. I mean, CIS is on the point of collapse, but it hasn't collapsed because people are heroes and they won't let it. The childcare programs are on the point of collapse and the heroes won't let it collapse, right? The DAs are struggling with the mental health issues. The folks who are doing food distribution are doing everything they can, right? I mean, the terrible thing is that sometimes it takes a collapse to have legislators realize just how bad things are. And we risk being Chicken Little because we say it's on the point of collapse, it's on the point of collapse. And then the heroes out on the front lines and you all don't let it collapse, whatever it is. And then legislators say to me, well, Matt, you said it was going to collapse, but it didn't collapse. So what's the problem? So that's always a challenge as well.
So I have a follow-up question. You mentioned CIS. So my follow-up question for that is, I have probably more children receiving services right now than we've ever had. And that is, of course, putting additional strain on CIS to be able to provide those services. So I'm wondering, is there data out there that says what the increase of children, especially in like that birth to 3 category is of children needing services, and what that means for our programs where we're trying to help these children with special needs?
Right. So we only have 2 minutes left, and I don't have time to fully answer that question. But what I would say is, unfortunately, in the CIS world, we have a huge challenge of data collection. That we have lots of anecdotal stories, but we do not have a comprehensive data set statewide that shows in any kind of real-time way what is happening out there. We certainly know that anecdotally, reports from the field are that pressure is increasing and that the case rate's going up, or cases are going up. We certainly hear that. Okay, so we only have a couple minutes left. I'm sorry, we don't have time to get into the CIS question more. It's why we're pushing for a CIS data system, an IT system, so we can solve that data gap. So we're just about at time. Does anyone have any last questions? Any points they want clarified?
I wonder if we can talk about the disability rate a little bit more. And I wonder if programs could contribute to the data rates, because I think individual programs do look at this. In our Bennington County Head Start Early Head Start program, we must serve 10% of children with disabilities, either an IFSP or an IEP, according to our Head Start program performance standards. Historically and before the pandemic, in early Head Start, we'd see about a 25 to 30% disability rate. And in Head Start, the preschoolers, we'd see about a 15 to 20% disability rate. Our current rates in our program right now are 60% disability for early Head Start and 30% of our Head Start enrollment.
All right, so Rebecca, what I'd like to do is I'd like to continue this conversation with you another time, or have one of our CIS working group reach out to you. And Dylan Beck, I'm going to lean on you to help me figure out how to close this loop, because I want to make sure I understand this, and we don't have time to get into it now, but I want to understand it more fully. So in the next couple of days, I will make sure I get back in touch with you, Rebecca, so we can have this conversation. Is that okay?
That will be great.
Okay, good. Thank you. Dora, what do we need to do to wrap up here?
We are all going to use the agenda to navigate into your next session and join the live session by clicking view live stream before you begin your short break. And that is in the chat as well. And Rebecca, I am also going to reach out to you about some of that disability information as well. Thank you all for joining.
Okay, thanks everyone. Good luck today, and we'll see you at your next session.